Hello tankers and tankettes, and welcome to the first of the tier 9 and 10 bracket winners. And before we start, I just want to maybe give some context to how fierce the competition was. The 4th place person, who just obviously missed out on the podium finish as it were, he still had over 10,000 damage. And I've mentioned all 3 winners have over 10,000. The 4th place person had over 10,000 damage. Unfortunately, there isn't a prize for 4th place in this contest, but I probably will feature that replay at some point anyway, just because even that amount, 10,012 damage in an E100, is still pretty damn good. So my apologies to Nexo5, who probably thought he was going to get something for that, because that's still a really good result. But it wasn't quite good enough. That's just how fierce this was. So without further ado, we are going to get into the replay and we're going to see who won 3rd place. And our 3rd place goes to Kampfgruppe in an E75. Yeah, I did mention there was going to be a tier 9, didn't I? Now if I'd said one of the top 3 is going to be a German heavy tank, you probably would have assumed that, like the 4th place, it was going to be an E100. You'd have been wrong. Now, the E100, of course, is the natural guess because it gets that big gun, it gets heat shells with a ridiculous amount of penetration, and with those heat shells and the ridiculous pen, you can do 750 damage per shot, which is like tank destroyer levels of damage. And yes, obviously the DPM's not comparable to a tank destroyer, but it's still pretty beefy, and it has a turret, unlike most tank destroyers. Now, yeah, if you can read what he's writing in the chat, the prize he's getting is for damage. It's not for, tact or diplomacy or wit particularly. Clearly he's not a fan of autoloaders. I know some people aren't, but there are better ways of expressing it, shall we say. But that's not what this replay is about. The autoloaders debate, well, if it could even be called a debate, I might go into it in another video. I've done autoloader videos in the past, but that's not what this is. This is a contest video about lots of damage, so we'll just put all that to one side and hope, I'm going to hope that the chat section doesn't turn into an autoloaders or artillery, which is worse debate, because obviously it's artillery. I mean, obviously, come on guys, obviously. But yeah, let's actually go to the match at hand, shall we? Now, he's got very good matchmaking. He's in an E75, and his only competition for damage out of the top tiers, well, he's got the 5120, which, if they're competently, if that's competently played, it could take some damage, but you tend to not be on the front lines with the 5120. And then there's also a Leo PTA. That's gone south, and it's crossed the river. That's usually not a good move in any tank, and it's going to prove to be not a good move in the Leo PTA, or the other 2 tanks that have joined him, the T32 and the T29. Now, he's in a reasonable position initially. The C line, he could push up here potentially if he had support on the flank. And there don't appear to be many enemy tanks on the A line. In fact, there only appears to be the AMX-12T and the Object 432. But the Object 432, of course, is one of the enemy tier 9s. So if he tries pushing forward, potentially he's going to get shot in the side, which is what the 12T's trying to do right now, but it's all just bouncing off. And there we go, there's an enemy IS-6 down, and the 432 is moving in on the Carnarvon. So he doesn't have to worry about that guy just at the moment, but clearly he is now thinking that he's overextended. He's falling back more towards his enemies, because if he's gonna, if he gets rushed or people come forward, he's going to need fire support, because this thing, as you can see, it only fires once every 13 seconds. It doesn't have the best rate of fire, it doesn't have the best DPM. So any fire support, if he puts himself out of range of friendly tanks, that could be a very bad move indeed. The E75, incredibly strong, and in theory this is a good place to be, keeping your enemies at a reasonable range and keeping your front armour towards them. But if they swarm him, that usually is game over, and that's the same with any heavy, slow-moving tank that has especially that has a lowish DPM in this case. I won't say super low DPM, but especially with the tier 10 Germans, the E100 and the Mouse. If you get surrounded, that's very bad news indeed. So he's worried about this 432. There is a 5100 and a 30 there, sort of defending the base, but they're really not positioned in a place where they can actually shoot that 430. And the 430 gets greedy or overconfident, I don't quite know, but he makes as if to push up, and gets under the guns of the 5100 and the 30, but that means that all the people that were a little bit further south on the 7 line could shoot him, including Kampfgruppe. So he's up to nearly 1800 damage, over 1800 damage in fact, nearly 1900 damage is what I meant to say, and he's cautiously poking forwards again a bit. The team doesn't seem to be doing that well. I mean, they've not... What you typically want to do is defend the closest crossing side, and then things get a bit more fluid from there. But his team, a couple have pushed across the enemy side, and they're not really defending this side in an organised way. But the enemy team aren't being particularly organised either. He was able to take out that isolated T-34, which is great. If you spot an isolated enemy like that, and you're pretty confident there's no one backing them up, then that's a gun you can safely take out the game, and that's what he's done. And especially when you are in a tank where you know you've got enough armour to stand a good chance of actually bouncing anything they can throw out at you. So the VK-45A, he shot that guy once. He's making a hasty getaway, which is probably the wise thing to do. And that just leaves the IS. So he's going to move up on the IS, who isn't really a big threat. Except the IS is about to... There we go, my timing is great. About to do the first damage to him in the battle so far, and damages his ammo rack as well. However, this is a nice little ram kill, so that's always nice to see. The E75 is... it's not the fastest machine, but it's not a bad mover for all its bulk, and that bulk means that you can actually get a decent amount of ramming damage sometimes. So, that IS was... he should have run away, basically, and didn't. Now the teams are not looking so great now. We're down to 5 tanks. Everyone's a bit scattered. The 5100 looks like he might initially be coming to Kampfgruppe's position, or at least to guard the river crossing. The 30 looks like he's falling in this direction as well. 5120 is in the middle and is probably doomed, and the 112 is cut off from everybody. Now Kampfgruppe may or may not have hit the 30 blind, but he knows that guy is probably alone. He's definitely a threat though. If he's to use this position to cover the middle, there's a real risk that if the 30's still there, he's just going to get shot in the butt. And as you can see, the 30 is able to shoot at him. However, the Tiger, that's an exactly average roll. That's always rather pleasing when that happens, oddly enough. The Tiger was a bit incautious, and there goes the 5120, and got slightly punished for it. And Kampfgruppe is just looking to do some damage because he knows the net is closing, and any damage he can do now means they've got less hit points once they've closed the distance. Now the 5100's doing a really silly thing. He's actually crossing the bridge. We know the 30's alone, and oh, ouch, yeah, that's the enemy E75 that actually shot him. The 30 only took his tracks, but that's left him vulnerable for... That must have been a scary few seconds. Obviously he knew the E75 was reloading, but... doesn't know what else is out there. That's a Tiger down, which is very good. But the 30 is still... The 30 is able to sit there and fire up at this position, and it looks like the enemy ISA and possibly the Tiger are closing on this area as well, because the enemies, of course, know exactly where they are. The 5120, 5100 even, I think he really should have come to Kampfgruppe's position, or at least stayed somewhere where he could support. You know, if he'd gone to the A line, maybe he could have fired across in support of Kampfgruppe and this 30, but instead he's put himself in a totally isolated position from either of these guys, and this 30 isn't going to last too much longer either, it looks like. The 416 pokes out, gets finished off, that's good, one less tank, and things have evened out a bit now, except now they've gone back in the enemy team's favour. The enemy E75 does have a lot of health, and although he's taking his time getting here, the ISA, even on his own, is still a dangerous opponent to come up against, as he's just learned. He's got a nasty gun, he's got more pen than this 128mm does, although less alpha. Oh, and there's the remaining Tiger as well. Less of a threat, but the ISA is actually playing in a sort of smart manner. And the 5100 has spotted the E75. He's not going to last too much longer, but I suppose at least he's delaying the E75 from grouping up with his comrades. Now, Kampfgruppe messes up that shot. The ISA uses the opportunity to drive across the gap. So that was a... When you outnumber somebody like this and you've got terrain to play with and you've got better mobility to play with, that was absolutely the right call to make. That was the smart thing to do. Another one into the Tiger, but the Tiger could afford to take that hit, although the next shot, in theory, should kill him. Kampfgruppe obviously thinks the IS-8 is going to flank, but it turns out the IS-8 didn't. I don't know why. And oh well, those were both bounces, but yeah, just occasionally the IS-8's armor is it just works. Doesn't work often, but just occasionally it does work. If it had been a higher pen gun, it may not have, but against the average, was it 248? It did. Now, the IS-8 hasn't reappeared, so Kampfgruppe correctly surmises that, yeah, there we go. He is actually trying to get around behind him now. Now, this is dangerous. He's actually really aggressive here. He comes round the corner, and there goes his last shell of AP. That was a real risk. He could have taken one in the lower front plate, but in this kind of situation, he had really not much choice. He had to be aggressive. He had to take out either the IS-8 or the Tiger. And yeah, there we go. There's the Tiger. I mean, the Tiger wasn't playing particularly badly either. It's just he couldn't move round in time. So we've got 1 versus 1 now. The pincer movement that they attempted failed. And now it's just down to firing at range. He's got 8 shells of APCR left. This E75 will take, what, 3 at most, and oof, it's unfortunate that missed because he's showing quite a lot of the side of his tank. The enemy E75, I would say, is not the best player, but he does eventually get his front armour pointed in the right direction. However, he keeps, I don't know, showing a little bit too much side angle at times, but given that Kampfgruppe is basically hoping that his APCR is just going to go through the turret, he's not hanging around to sit and aim for the commander's hatch. He's just trying to get the flat of the front of the turret, because he knows one hit potentially could be enough to kill him. So there we go, that E75 showing way too much side armour again. Right, another 5 APCR shells. He's surely going to... one of them is going to pen and kill this guy, right? He's down to less than 300 hit points just about. That's one's bounce so far. Again, side armour, not the brightest plan, but unfortunately for Kampfgruppe, he straightens up just at the wrong moment, and Kampfgruppe not wanting to sit there and aim and make himself an easier target. He's relying on this guy having a difficult time trying to hit him. You see us just rocking back and forth. Manages to plant one in the ground, down to 2 APCR shells now, and after that he's only got 4 HE. So yeah. I think, honestly, he should have just switched the HE at this point, but, you know, 1 APCR pen, and that one bounces, 1 APCR pen would have done it, and he did have 2 on the flat of the turret already. But, so far, the last couple of shots have just, like, the gun or RNG or whatever has just trolled him, and he's not been able to replicate that again. So, yeah, he had 8 APCR shells left, and now he's down to the 4 HE shells. But this is probably the... I mean, if they'd both come down to HE and they had lots of health left between them, this could have been a real drawn-out, like, I don't even know. Can you imagine if they'd both run out of shells? Although, on the other hand, we have no idea how many shells the enemy E75 has left. He might have had way more. As we can see, Kampfgruppe has had to fire most of his, down to his last 2 shells, and 9,185 damage on the clock. However, I said this was over 10,000 damage, so we shall have a look at the scores and see that it's 10,089. Some of those blind shots actually hit. Of course, the damage counter only counts what it can see, so it doesn't register all the damage done. Along with that, he got an ace mastery, a couple of ribbons, a steel wall with 5,475 damage bounce, and this is with the 9.3, you know, the more recent steel wall calculations, so it doesn't count stuff that went in tracks. So the real figure is actually higher. He got a high caliber, unsurprisingly, and a top gun, which was rather nice. For an E75, that was an incredibly impressive performance. It started off looking a bit dicey, but I mean, his team collapsed, but they collapsed at like just the correct rate, so that he was able to, as the noose was drawing around the remaining tanks, he was able to keep doing that damage. He was able to keep that gun singing, and wind up with a result that you wouldn't necessarily think the E75 was capable of. But that was really well done. Of course, he only made 541 credits out of that because he just basically fired all of his ammunition, including all of his premium ammunition. But to have done that much damage and fired that many premium shells and still walk away with, you know, any profit at all with a regular account, that was, that was not too bad either. With a premium account, he would have made over 100,000 credits, 128,000, nearly 129,000, with about 44,000 left over after the ammo costs. To do that with a regular tank and not a premium tank, a premium tank, 4k damage would get you that, maybe 5k, but to do that with a regular tank, that just goes to show you how much damage you have to do to get those kind of credit results. So, this was third place. It's only going to get better from here, believe me. I mean, this was a good result, but the next two results are, by their very nature, going to have to be better. And the tanks that they are may well surprise you. So, well, we'll see. So, if you enjoyed this video, you can leave any comments below. You can hit the like button. And, as always, stay tuned for more.